ask you something uncomfortable. How long have you been almost profitable? Be honest. How many years have you been in the market saying this is the year it clicks? Yet somehow you're still circling the same emotional mistakes, the same impulsive entries, the same blown discipline. At some point, you have to stop blaming volatility, algorithms, and bad luck. What if you're not stuck because trading is hard? What if you're stuck because you're still thinking like someone who just left Egypt? You've left the job, you've opened the account. You've learned the indicators, but if your fear, impatience, and scarcity are still leading your decisions, you're not in the promised land. You're still in the wilderness. And the question is this: are you wandering or are you being refined? Stay with me, because before this video ends, you're going to see exactly why your trading journey is taking longer and what has to change. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. James 1:22. When you think about the story of Moses leading the Israelites for 40 years, you are not just looking at an ancient migration. You are witnessing a masterclass in transformation, in pressure, in patience, in leadership under fire. The story truly begins in bondage. The people of Israel had been enslaved in Egypt for generations. Their backs were bent under forced labor. Their cries were heavy with exhaustion. They were not just physically oppressed. They were mentally conditioned to survive rather than dream. And into that atmosphere stepped Moses, reluctant, imperfect, once a fugitive himself, called to confront the most powerful ruler in the world, Pharaoh. With nothing but a staff and conviction, he declared freedom over a people who had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. Through plagues that shook Egypt's economy and pride, through blood-stained rivers and nights filled with anguish, God forced Pharaoh's hand. Finally, the Israelites were released. But liberation is only the first step. Freedom is dramatic. Transformation is long. When they reached the Red Sea and saw Pharaoh's army charging behind them, panic erupted. The same people who had just witnessed miracles cried out in fear, accusing Moses of leading them to die. Yet in that defining moment, Moses stretched out his staff and the sea parted. Walls of water rose on both sides. The people crossed on dry land. And when the Egyptian army followed, the waters crashed back down. The chains of Egypt were broken for good. But here's where the story deepens. The wilderness journey to the promised land should have taken weeks. Instead, it took 40 years. The desert was not just a physical landscape of scorching heat and barren terrain. It became a spiritual testing ground. There was no familiar infrastructure, no predictable food supply, no visible roadmap. Every day required trust. Every morning manna fell from heaven just enough for that day. If they tried to hoard it, it spoiled. They had to learn daily dependence. Yet the people struggled. They complained about the lack of water. They grumbled about the food. They romanticized slavery, saying Egypt was better because at least it was predictable. Fear makes people nostalgic for chains. And Moses stood in the tension between divine promise and human doubt, interceding for a community that often wanted to stone him. At Mount Sinai, Moses received the 10 Commandments, a covenant that would shape not just a nation, but civilizations for centuries. Laws were established. Identity was clarified. They were no longer just former slaves. They were a chosen people with structure, boundaries, and purpose. And yet, even after witnessing miracles, they faltered. When Moses delayed on the mountain, they built a golden calf, crafting an idol from the very gold they had carried out of Egypt. It was a stunning display of how quickly people revert to what feels tangible when patience is required. The wilderness exposed their fears, their impatience, their insecurities. But it also revealed resilience, growth, and refinement. Over those 40 years, an entire generation passed away. The people who left Egypt, the ones whose minds were shaped by slavery, would not enter the promised land. The journey became longer because the mindset needed time to change. Freedom of body and to be matched by freedom of mind. Moses himself carried immense weight. He mediated disputes, absorbed criticism, endured loneliness, and remained faithful despite frustration. He struck a rock in anger when he was told to speak to it, and even he faced consequences. Leadership does not exempt anyone from accountability. Even great leaders are human. Finally, after 4 decades of wandering, of circling the same terrain, of learning and unlearning trust, the Israelites stood at the edge of Canaan, the promised land, flowing with milk and honey. Moses would see it from a distance but would not enter. His assignment was to lead them out and through, not into. Joshua would carry them forward. And that is the transformational heartbeat of the story. The wilderness was never punishment alone. It was preparation. It was the crucible that reshaped a slave mentality into a covenant identity. It was the classroom where trust replaced fear, where dependence replaced arrogance, where structure replaced chaos. 40 years was not just about distance. It was about development. And if you look closely, the story invites you to ask yourself a powerful question. What in your life is taking longer than expected because something inside you still needs to change? The desert season, they're uncomfortable, but they refine you. The delay is not always denial. Sometimes it is design. Moses' journey reminds us that liberation is immediate, but transformation is gradual. And if you stay faithful through the wilderness, you will stand on the edge of promises you only dreamed about. There is possibility, one that requires courage to face, that your trading journey feels long, not because you lack intelligence or access, but because you are not truly listening. Not listening to your rules, not listening to the data, not listening to the quiet conviction that tells you to wait. Much like the Israelites who were being led toward the promised land but kept resisting instruction, you may be receiving guidance yet arguing with it internally. The market shows you structure, levels, discipline, and you override it with emotion. You say you want the promised land of consistency and profit, but when patience is required, you complain. When restraint is required, you rush. When reflection is required, you distract. The wilderness is often prolonged not by distance, but by disobedience to what you already know. And the powerful question becomes this: are you delayed because the market is unclear, or because you keep muting the very lessons meant to elevate you? And before you dismiss that idea, let me slow this down and ask you something real. What if the delay isn't confusion, but resistance? Let me ask you a few honest questions about this. And as I do, don't just nod silently. Comment below if any of this sounds familiar. Have you ever known your setup wasn't fully formed, but took the trade anyway? Have you felt the quiet nudge to wait for confirmation, but clicked early because you didn't want to miss it? Have you reviewed your plan, agreed with it intellectually, and then abandoned it the moment price moved against you? Have you ever blamed the market for being unpredictable when deep down you know you broke your own rule? If any of that hit a little too close, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. But you might be wondering longer than necessary because you're not fully listening. So tell me below, does any of it sound familiar? Now let's dig a little deeper. Did you leave Egypt, but Egypt hasn't left you? You funded the account, you opened the brokerage. You learned about Fibonacci levels, RSI, volume, structure, the whole nine. On the surface, you left financial Egypt. You're no longer sitting on the sidelines. But if we're being real, some of the old mental conditioning may still be running the show. Scarcity of thinking, fear of loss, urgency to finally make it. The same survival wiring that helped you get through hard lessons might now be sabotaging your patience in the market. You might still trade like someone who feels they can't afford to wait. You rush entries, you size too big. You panic at minor pullbacks, and then you call it bad luck. But what if it's not luck? What if it's leftover conditioning from seasons where you had to scramble just to survive? The market exposes survival energy quickly. It doesn't reward urgency. It rewards structure. And I say this gently. If your nervous system still feels like it's fighting for safety, it will be nearly impossible to trade calmly. You cannot execute high-level strategy where your body thinks it's in danger. That tension you feel before clicking buy, that's not just about the trade. That may be years of scarcity whispering, don't mess this up. The wilderness season in trading might be longer because your mindset needs upgrading before your profits do. You don't just need better entries. You may need emotional freedom. Freedom from the internal Egypt that says, hurry or you'll lose everything. Trading successes slows down for people who are still sprinting internally. Are you complaining about manna instead of trusting the process? In the wilderness, the Israelites received manna daily. Just enough, not extra, not surplus, just sufficient. In trading, that might look like small, consistent wins, modest gains, a slow-growing account. But you want fireworks. You want breakout weeks. You want the finally made it screenshot. And when growth is steady but not dramatic, frustration creeps in. You may find yourself saying, this isn't enough. Other traders are scaling faster. Why am I still here? And slowly, dissatisfaction turns into overtrading. You abandon your rules. You start forcing setups that aren't clean. You increase size to speed up progress. And the very impatience you justify as ambition becomes the reason the journey stretches longer. Here's the heartfelt confrontation. Are you despising small consistency because it doesn't feed your ego? The market often gives you just enough to build discipline, just enough to test your gratitude, just enough to strengthen patience. But if you treat steady growth as insufficient, you'll sabotage the very thing that compounds. Maybe your trading timeline feels long because you're resisting the daily bread season. The market is asking, can you be faithful with small? And until that answer becomes yes, expansion waits. Let me ask you this. Do you keep building golden calves? When Moses delayed on the mountain, the people built a golden calf because waiting made them uncomfortable. In trading, golden calves show up as new strategies every 2 weeks. New indicators, new gurus, new Discord groups. You start something disciplined, and then when results aren't instant, you pivot. Not because the strategy failed, but because your patience failed. You say you're committed, but are you? Or are you chasing certainty? The moment drawdowns appear, you assume something is wrong. Instead of reviewing your plan calmly, you abandon it entirely. You melt down your consistency to create a shiny new system that feels safer in the moment. Let me ask you something directly. Is your lack of profit coming from the market or from your constant switching? Mastery requires repetition. Repetition requires trust. Trust requires staying. But if you keep building golden calves every time discomfort arises, you reset your progress again and again. It may be taking longer because you haven't stayed anywhere long enough to actually grow roots. The wilderness feels endless when you keep circling the same lesson. Discipline over impulse. Do you want the promised land without the refinement? Like the Israelites, they wanted Canaan, they wanted milk and honey, but they resisted the refinement process. In trading, you want the funded account, the consistent withdrawals, the financial freedom, but refinement looks like journaling when you don't feel like it. Sitting on your hands when the setup isn't there, taking a small loss without emotional collapse, that's the real wilderness work. The uncomfortable truth, some traders want income more than they want transformation. They want results without internal restructuring. But trading is not just a financial activity, it is a psychological mirror. It reveals ego, fear, impatience, entitlement, insecurity. And if you avoid that mirror, growth stalls. You might be in a delay season, not because you're incapable, but because you're being shaped. The market is refining your impulse control. It's strengthening your emotional regulation. It's teaching restraint over reaction. And that work cannot be rushed. So here's a loving confrontation. What if this longer than expected season isn't punishment, but preparation? What if the delay is not proof that you're failing, but evidence that you're being forged? The desert does not mean you're lost. It means you're learning. And if you're honest enough to see where you are in this process, that's the moment real progress begins. Let me start by saying this clearly. If your trading journey is taking longer than you expected, that does not mean you are unintelligent, incapable, or destined to fail. It means you're human. Many traders try to carry the entire process alone, studying alone, losing alone, questioning themselves alone, because somewhere inside they believe they should be able to figure it all out. But isolation is heavy. And sometimes the delay isn't about ability. It's about refusing support. You may pride yourself in independence. You've survived hard things. You've built businesses, raised families, earned degrees, overcome obstacles. So when it comes to trading, you approach it the same way. I'll handle this. And that strength has served you well in life. But trading is not just skill, it's psychology. And psychology shifts faster in community than in isolation. Be honest with yourself. How often have you watched videos but never implemented fully? Downloaded tools but never consistently used them? Heard guidance but filtered it through your own preferences instead of truly applying it? Sometimes help is available, but pride edits it. The Israelites had a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Guidance was available, yet they still resisted direction. Not because it wasn't clear, but because surrender is uncomfortable. And I do want to validate something tender here. Trusting support can feel risky, especially if you've been disappointed before, especially if you've had to learn self-reliance early in life. Opening yourself up to guidance can feel like admitting weakness, but it's not weakness, it's wisdom. The most successful traders in the world have coaches, communities, structure. They don't grow alone. You might not be delayed because you lack knowledge. You might be delayed because you're trying to shortcut growth by avoiding accountability. Support accelerates awareness. Community exposes blind spots. Shared study sharpens discernment. When you hear others wrestle with fear, impatience, and discipline, something shifts. You realize you're not broken. You're developing. There is something powerful about sitting in a space where trading is not just numbers, but character formation. Where charts are discussed alongside mindset. Where discipline is treated as spiritual maturity, not just technical skill. Where you are seen, not just as a trader, but as a person becoming more regulated, more patient, more aligned. That kind of environment shortens wilderness seasons. So if any part of you is tired of wandering alone, if you're ready to stop circling the same lessons in private, I want to invite you into the Trading Bible Study, not because you're failing, but because you're ready to grow faster with guidance. Come study. Come sharpen your discipline. Come be supported. And if this resonates with you, say so below. You don't have to walk this by yourself anymore. You've got this. Peace and blessings. Dr. O.